doesn't take an aviation expert to spot the differences between the two craft. Most of them have to do with size and power.
There was a change of the tail unit. It's a twin fin tail to compensate for carrying Buran on top of the aircraft. There is no aft cargo door because of the length of the fuselage, and we increased the number of rear landing gear struts. We have 7 on each side for the Antonov-225, with a total of 32 tires, including front landing gear.
Designers at Antonov in Kiev were only given 3.5 years to design this gigantic new jet and get it off the ground. Initially, the task seemed insurmountable. Engineers couldn't even find a place big enough to build the jet.
It was a problem to find a location to construct the aircraft, for it would not fit in any existing facility. At first, we had to build the fuselage in parts and store the parts at angles to fit them inside the shop.
Thanks to Soviet bureaucracy, at one point, the Antonov-225's designers had more jet than hangar.
In the USSR at the time, it was more complicated to construct a new building than a new jet. We used to construct aircraft in those days quicker than buildings, and we had to build the 225 so rapidly it grew faster than the building we were making it in.
There were design difficulties as well. The 225 was designed to transport gigantic goods, and the jet needed to be able to land wherever those outsized objects needed to be.
We encountered great problems with landing gear. We faced the problem of creating the aircraft with a takeoff weight of 600 tons that would also be capable of landing on unprepared airfields. The landing gear had to be made so that it would not break the runway.
The solution to the problem? A massive bank of landing gear on the Antonov-225 that puts 18-wheelers to shame. 32 tires burn rubber every time this 600-ton behemoth touches down. There were other challenges as well. The head designer recalls one whoops moment when the jet was nearly complete.
When the aircraft was constructed, it turned out that it wasn't possible to install the Buran on top of it. We had no cargo handling equipment back then, and the crane on the field was not able to install it. So engineers quickly designed a special crane to lift the Buran 60 feet onto the 225's back.
The 225's designers overcame the massive difficulties associated with their massive aircraft and met their deadline. With pomp and circumstance, the aircraft was rolled out of the hangar. Now it was time to prove the 6-engine giant could fly. The Antonov Design Bureau labored hard to meet the strict Soviet government deadline for the 225.
It was a tradition in those days to finish the tasks by the end of the year. The aircraft flew first on December 1st, 1988.
The director of flight testing, who initially thought flying the Antonov-225 would be impossible, suddenly experienced a change of heart as he took part in this craft's historic first flight.
We started to test the aircraft on taxiway. Next, trial runs on the runway, and finally, the first maiden flight. And when it took to the air, I saw that flying the 225 was absolutely possible, and it was incredible.
Everyone who worked on the jet felt a deep connection to it, from designers to test pilots.
I felt very, very proud when I first saw it take off. It was a joyous time. My name is Alexander Galunenko. I'm the leading test pilot of the Antonov-225 aircraft. Of course I enjoyed this job. It is like no other, a real challenge. This aircraft is absolutely one of a kind.
The 225 broke 109 world records for range, altitude, and cargo capabilities within months of its maiden flight. In 1989, the aircraft accomplished the mission it was designed for. It flew with a 90-ton Soviet space shuttle, the Buran, attached to it externally for the very first time.
It is very, very hard to express how I felt. Proud. I felt joy. I was in some euphoric state. I was overcome with joy when it flew with the orbiter. Everyone was.
The 225 with Buran attached made its debut to a worldwide audience at the 1989 Paris Air Show. The gargantuan jet stole the show.
Well, I remember Paris in 1989 when all the other aircraft at the show had almost no visitors, but there was a long line of people standing around our craft wanting to visit it.
The Antonov-225's bulk and strength quickly captured the imagination of the world. There were even proposals to turn the Antonov into a flying cruise ship.
There were a lot of bizarre proposals on the part of very wealthy and rich people abroad. It was suggested to make it a flying hotel, with rooms and suites on the upper deck. And on the lower deck, there were swimming pools and casinos.
And how many people could lounge aboard this recreational fantasy?
It is technically feasible that the jet could carry 1,500 people.
Here's some perspective for you. The largest capacity passenger jet in flight today, the Boeing 747-400, carries a mere 524 passengers when fully loaded. With modifications, the Antonov-225 could carry almost 3 times as many people. Buran ended up making only one space flight, and the 225 had only been airborne for a few short years when an event took place that changed the world and grounded all grandiose dreams about the future of this giant jet.
In 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, and the Soviet Union's space program, which included this aircraft, lost its financing.
Boris Yeltsin canceled the space program due to lack of funds and for another reason. Turns out the project manager was one of the planners of the attempted 1991 coup. The King of the Skies became a hulking derelict, its parts cannibalized for other jets. The only Antonov-225 in the world was being slowly parted out, sacrificed bit by bit to help save the company that developed it from economic ruin.
It was grounded because of lack of funds, and it stayed idle for 8 years.
The jet that had been created for Cold War competition would eventually be reborn as a capitalist tool. With the fall of the Soviet Union, the Antonov Design Bureau was forced into the survival mode. In order to stay in business without government money, they turned to their fleet of giant airliners.
We began marketing the main aircraft